Hello, in this video I'm going to be going through a few problems in practice problem set 1-10 in which we are reconstructing arguments. I don't intend to cover argument reconstruction with anything like the detail that I did in the assigned reading. I'm going to be drawing on that and using a few examples to illustrate those points. However, let me say briefly that argument reconstruction is a format that we can use to rewrite an argument, not just its conclusion, but its premise or premises, in such a way that we are as clear as possible about the reasoning. That is, about the content of the premise or premises and the content of the conclusion. That's a necessary step prior to evaluating an argument. We won't turn to argument evaluation until beginning in Chapter 2. But argument reconstruction is also going to help us with the rest of the topics that we cover in Chapter 1 that have to do with identifying the parts of arguments, that is, their premises and their conclusions. You have a box in your book labeled Box 1D, which is Argument Reconstruction Rules. I gave all of these boxes numbers followed by letters, so that you could easily search in whatever kind of document you're working with to find them, given that there are differences in the page numbers depending on the program that you might be using as compared to the program I'm using, as compared to the program that another student is using in order to read the course materials. All right, going to 1-10, I am going to start with number 5. In which a fictional character from a Sherman Alexie short story says the following: "Being a Spokane Indian, I only pick up Indian hitchhikers." We don't have any introducers used here, but notice that with a bit of rewording, we could use because to clarify the structure. We could understand this fictional character as saying, because I am a Spokane Indian, I only pick up Indian hitchhikers. So that lets us know that before the comma, we have premise material, and after the comma, we have the conclusion. Now, always in argument reconstruction, we write each premise as a separate numbered statement. We write it as a complete sentence, make sure the first one makes sense by itself. I can't copy just a Spokane Indian. For one thing, that's not a complete sentence. For another, it doesn't make any sense by itself. And for another thing, it is missing something crucial in relationship to the conclusion, namely that this is about the speaker. So let's write as the first premise, I am a Spokane Indian. Now, there's no limit as to the number of premises that an argument might have, except that the number has to be finite. It can't be infinitely long argument. This happens to be an example with only one premise. We always in argument reconstruction put a line after the last premise, or to think of the same thing another way, put a line right above the conclusion. You can think of that line as working exactly like the word therefore. It's saying what comes next is a conclusion. Well, the conclusion here is simple. I only pick up Indian hitchhikers. All right, that was number 4, and that was number 5. Number 5. And that's a pretty simple one. Let me turn now to number 7, which says, last week, the Bush administration official in charge of convening military commissions at Guantanamo told that a Saudi national, Mohammed al-Qahtani, had been tortured in U.S. custody and therefore could not be prosecuted. Well, I'm noticing the word therefore, that common conclusion introducer. So after that is the position of the conclusion where it says could not be prosecuted. Obviously, that's not a complete sentence, but let's worry about that later. In argument reconstruction, the conclusion is the last thing we're writing. I'm noticing here also that the writer of this editorial in the Los Angeles Times is not giving their own argument, but is giving an argument that they are attributing to the Bush administration official in charge of convening military operations at Guantanamo. The premise in the argument was that this person had been tortured in U.S. custody, and that's being given as the reason for believing that that person could not be prosecuted. Now, I don't think the fact that the person is a Saudi national is relevant to whether or not the person could be prosecuted. No, it's that the person was tortured. That's the reason for believing the person cannot be prosecuted. So I'm going to leave out the argument attribution to the Bush administration official, and I'm going to leave out the nationality of the person in question. And the premise is then just simply that this person had been tortured in U.S. custody, and that's the reason for believing that this person could not be prosecuted. So again, we have an example like in number 5 with only one premise, and always again put a line above every conclusion within an argument reconstruction. I want to turn now to number 12, which will allow me to illustrate a couple of other things about argument reconstruction for you. Number 12 says, arthritis poses a huge societal burden, not only because of its high prevalence and large economic impact, but also because of the pain and functional limitations it causes for people. Well, if you remember, we just recently have been talking about ways that the word because can be modified that affect its meaning, and we have one of those here. In the use of not only to modify because in the first line. Not only because is letting us know that we're about to get a premise that the arguer believes is one of more than one premises that support their conclusion. All right, after not only because, this says, of its high prevalence and large economic impact. That clearly does not make sense with it by itself, and when we start, we need something that makes sense by itself. So let's start with then arthritis as the subject of the premise here. And we can say arthritis has a high prevalence and large economic impact. Before I continue with this reconstruction, I want to comment about what I've written as premise number 1. You could easily break that into 2 complete sentences. Arthritis has a high prevalence. It has a large economic impact. And that would be perfectly fine. It's fine to combine, to have this compound sentence here as it was in the original, and it would be also fine to break that into 2 separate complete sentences that then would give us premise 1 and premise 2. And actually, why don't I do that with the next little part of this? But also because this says, of the pain and functional limitations it causes for people. Now, if I turn that into a complete sentence, I could leave it together as a compound sentence, but just for purposes of illustration, I'll break it into 2 separate premises. I do need complete sentences here. If I use the word it, the only thing the word it can refer back to is arthritis, so I can start with the word it and say it causes pain. It would also be fine to use the word arthritis as the subject of premise number 2 rather than the pronoun it. And going on then to a third premise, Let's see, you can say it causes functional limitations for people. Well, that's the end of, so to speak, the premise material. In other words, that's the end of the reasons given by this arguer for believing their conclusion, which is that arthritis poses a huge societal burden. And I can repeat the word arthritis if I want, or I can use the word it, the pronoun it, to refer to arthritis, given that the referent of it is completely unambiguous and clear. In other words, there's nothing that it could refer to other than arthritis. And let me mention again about the number of premises. This could have been done with 4 premises. And if you want to have a really long run-on sentence, it could have been done with just 1 sentence or 1 premise as well, or anything in between. All that matters in terms of the number of premises is not the number, but what matters is that you include all the premise material above the line. That is, all of the material that the arguer believes helps to support their conclusion. All right, I hope this has been helpful to you. I feel like there's a lot more to say about argument reconstruction than I can say in one short video. So definitely, if you have questions at all about argument reconstruction, let me know, and I'll be happy to work with you on this further. Take care. So long for now.